right, welcome to everyone on our very first official Wood County WorkLink Lunch and Learn. Today, we are talking about why public transit matters in Wood County and also why supporting transit solutions matter. And as everybody knows, Wood County is a very big place, and the same solution is not going to work everywhere. And so we need to become informed to know what some of the tools in the toolbox are. And this Lunch and Learn is designed to specifically look at Wood County and its specific features and address that issue for us. And there are lots of transit solutions out there, of course, but they don't all make sense everywhere. So that's what we're trying to do today, is kind of like pare it down so that we know what we're all looking at and thinking about. It's my privilege to be here. My name is Callie Sawaya. I'm the project manager for the Wood County WorkLink program. This is an ODOT-funded effort to increase workforce mobility around the state, actually, not just in Wood County. And we are part of a larger program. I have my partners in this effort, TMACOG and GLCAP, and then our consultants at Nelson Nygaard and some of their sub-consultants helping us with this effort. So just as a quick reminder, this project has been going on since last May, and it is scheduled to wrap up in the spring at the end of March. So we are right in the middle right now, and we are gearing up for a workshop we've got coming up in December. We also have another Lunch and Learn next Tuesday at this time. I apologize for those of you who are off due to Veterans Day. We somehow scheduled that and a lot of people accepted that. So we're going to move forward and record that. So if you are off, you will still have a chance to see that good information about Vanpool from our partners at Commute by Enterprise. So without further ado, let me just make a few housekeeping things. We want to remember to keep your mics on mute. If you have a comment, feel free to use the chat. We will also have a chance at the end to answer questions. And I think that's it. I'm going to turn the time over to Paul Ludy, who is our presenter today.
Okay, thank you, Callie. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So just a little bit of background. I think you all know a little bit about WorkLink and what this study is about. I did want to just talk a little bit about our team. So I've got Tom Brown here from Nelson Nygaard. By the way, Paul Ludy with Nelson Nygaard. Tom Brown is on our team. He's going to be co-presenting with me today. And we're going to talk a little bit about what is transit. And we've been talking a lot about mobility and transportation and all the things. But I think this is an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into public transit, kind of some of the mechanics of it, what it is, why is it important. And then Tom's going to talk a little bit about those supporting strategies that help to support public transit. Transit is just one part of the transportation ecosystem. I did want to recognize BJ Fisher, who is on our team, as well as Murphy Epson, who is our kind of engagement lead. So we've got a number of us working on this project, as you all know. So without further ado, I think I'm going to turn it over to my screen here. Let's see if I can make this happen.
You need to fluff.
Just like I was muted. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Okay. Yes. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. As Callie mentioned, this is about kind of giving you a deeper dive in public transit, why it matters, and some of those supporting transportation strategies. So before we get into sort of the mechanics of what is transit, why is it important, all the things, we thought we'd sort of contextualize it a little bit and talk about Wood County. You all know Wood County well, but I think it helps to contextualize why we're talking about this. And basically just to say that we know that employment is expanding and it is changing. And a lot of the agricultural lands, especially in northern Wood County, but even in Bowling Green and North Baltimore, a lot of agricultural land has kind of been converting to new employment, manufacturing, warehousing, et cetera. Even retail, as you can see from this slide, is kind of the southern part of Rossburg. And because of that, well, and also because of that, because of COVID, we know that travel patterns have really changed pretty dramatically too. The way that people get around, the way they live their lives. There are a lot of other things that have happened in terms of how we travel, with online ordering, with Uber and Lyft, flexible work schedules for some folks. And so that really, we just wanted to kind of frame it up to say that we know that Wood County is changing. You know it's changed, but it's really reshaping transportation needs in the county. We also know that as part of this project, that access to jobs is really a critical part, not just in Wood County, but in Ohio and in the country. Getting people to and from employment has always been a big part of why transit is important. In Wood County, just again to contextualize it a little bit, there are about 72,000 work jobs in the county, so physical jobs, but there are only about 58,000 residents who are employed in the county or employable to have jobs. So that means that a lot of people are coming into Wood County for their jobs, and they're traveling fairly long distances to do that. We also learned, and BJ has participated in some of these employer and employee focus groups, and we've done some surveying. And a lot of employers have identified transportation as a really important and critical challenge for them to maintain a dependable workforce. And so we just, again, kind of wanted to frame up before we start just diving in and talking about transit. Why is it important? It's because access to jobs is really critical. The other piece of this is that driving is relatively easy. Doesn't mean it's stress-free, but it's easy. But on the other hand, it's expensive. It has a big cost to it. And a lot of the times those costs are buried and we don't necessarily think about those costs. A lot of people in Wood County, and this is not atypical in Ohio and outside of really major urban areas, but most people drive to get to work. They either drive alone or they carpool. There's a fairly large percentage of people who say they carpool in Wood County. But the large majority of people are not commuting by walking or biking or using transit. So that's not necessarily their fault. It's just that those mobility options are not, there aren't a ton of mobility options aside from driving. The other piece of kind of the expensive part of driving is that, you know, for some folks, especially for lower wage workers, unexpected expenses like a car breaking down or something can be catastrophic. It can mean losing their job. And so that's a really important note. I think we would just want to keep all of these things in mind, not just for low wage workers, for people that are older adults or people who don't, you know, maybe on a fixed income. That's really an important part of kind of contextualizing all of this. The other thing is that, you know, the combined cost of housing and transportation generally should be about 45% or less. That's kind of based on national research. In Wood County, you're at about 51%. That means there's a little bit of an extra strain on the overall household expenses. And so transportation, if we can lower those costs, that can be a really important thing for some folks, especially, again, as I said, especially for lower wage workers or for older adults on fixed income. Public transit, on the other hand, can save money in the sense that people may not have to, like, you may not have to have two cars in a household. You may be able to share a car. And that public transit, if you were taking it every day, could save a pretty significant amount of your annual household expenses. We also know, again, from the surveying and from the interviews that we've done, that, you know, providing workforce transportation can be cheaper than collectively for employers than losing and retraining employees or even potentially relocating because they don't have those mobility options. So again, driving is an easy thing, but it's expensive, and there are a lot of things that kind of contribute to that cost. And it's not always just monetary cost. So why does transit matter in this context? Of course, it provides access. It provides access to jobs and services. It opens opportunities that some people may not be able to use. They may not be able to access those jobs or those services. Transit is also a really important part of supporting economic development. The picture in the upper right-hand corner here is the Amazon. And the Amazon partially was attracted to Rossford because of the transit services that were provided by TARTA and providing that service. Economic development is a really important part of public transit. May not always not, some people may not use it ever, but it still can contribute to communities in that way. Transit also gives options. So not everybody travels the same exact way every single day. As I mentioned, some households may have 1 or 2 cars in their household. What if one of those cars breaks down? Or, I've got a teenage daughter. What if they need that car and then you're stuck without one? Transit can be that other option that can, provide you and get you where you need to go. We also know that we can't continue to build, infinite roadways. And so transit is a really good tool, especially in really large urban areas, but even in suburban or, places like Wood County, where you kind of want to manage your transportation resources. So it's a really good way of sort of managing and not having every single person drive for every single trip. And then I think this is the picture on the bottom right. What if driving wasn't an option? Not everybody can or really wants to drive. And so transit can be that other alternative for them. So what makes transit successful? This is kind of the classic chicken and egg problem, where the density of places really dictates the transit service that corresponds to it. And so the graphic on the right really shows the kind of the appropriate types of transit service that match the land use type. That doesn't mean that it is always has to be this way. It's sort of a guide. But I think what's really important about this graphic on the right is it shows that even low density or even rural areas can still have public transit service. It just looks a little bit different. And the level of service is a little bit different. It needs to be customized. The graphic on the bottom part of this, I think it's important to just say that, the quality of service and the frequency of service can also help to drive and improve land use and can change land use. But it's sort of that chicken and egg. Sometimes the land use needs to drive the transit can drive land use. But all of these things really work in tandem together. And the other piece of it is access and integration and making sure that people can get to and from public transit. Their communities can be walkable and bikeable, and it all kind of works together. This graphic, I'm not going to go through all of the pieces of this, but just to say that there are a number of elements that go into making public transit successful and high quality. For example, it's really important for it to serve a variety of destinations. That means that people are using it along the entire line. People like to travel in more direct ways. We don't generally like to go out of direction to get to where we want to go. Public transit is really no different. I think if we can make it as direct and serve destinations as directly as we can and efficiently as we can, those are really important things. We like to have good information. We don't like to be confused about things. So really clear information about what is available and how we can navigate the service is really important. Amenities are also really important. So making sure that public transit services are as dignified as anything else that they're going to use, with good lighting and good shelter, good information. And then I think the other piece of this is that, people getting to and from transit is critical. So having good pedestrian infrastructure, good bike infrastructure. The point here is that I think all of to make transit really high quality and successful is more than just running a bus up and down the street. It's about all of these things that combine together. And so we have to be thinking about those things. Is it hard? Yes, but I think it's important to think about it holistically. And all of these things really contribute to making transit higher quality and more successful. So these are the kinds of transit services. That's kind of like a little bit of higher level framing it up. But now I wanted to talk a little bit more about the kinds of transit services that you might see in Toledo or in northern Wood County, central Wood County, throughout the region. So the buses I'm showing here, these are all TARTA buses, but there are fixed route services in PG. There are fixed route services throughout Ohio. So what I'm going to do is just kind of talk you through some of these different services and what's the, like, how do they work? And I know you have all seen these, so it's not surprising, but I think it's helpful to kind of frame up the differences in the transit services that are out there. So in the upper left-hand corner is we have our local fixed route buses, and those are the ones that you may see in more urban or suburban kind of communities. Route 10 that comes down into Rossford, of course, is one of those local fixed route services. Though it is also similar to the regional fixed route. So it's a little bit longer distance. And so there's a slight distinction between kind of a local fixed route and a regional fixed route. Regional fixed routes maybe have certain sections that are nonstop. So the Route 10 does do that currently. It operates on I-75. It kind of makes a faster trip out of downtown, makes fewer stops. So there's a slight distinction between those two kinds of fixed route services. On the other side is microtransit and on-demand. Microtransit, on-demand, those are kind of services that do not operate along a fixed route. I'll talk a little bit about some of the differences there. They tend to use smaller vehicles. And then paratransit is really for people with disabilities, and that is a complementary service to the fixed route services that you'll see out there. So a little kind of diving a little bit deeper into the local fixed route characteristics. And I wanted to also point out on the bottom left, we kind of pulled out those land use types. So this is where you might see local fixed route service within kind of urban mixed use or neighborhood, suburban areas, even mixed neighborhoods like Bowling Green. So, but local fixed routes, again, typically operate on a fixed route and a schedule. So you can see a schedule on the bottom left-hand side. They follow that. The buses are try to stay on time. And they go to one end and they turn around and they come back and that's their trip. Bowling Green has a local fixed route. We've got the TARTA Route 10, which is a local fixed route. They tend to have set stops, and they don't, not always, not all fixed routes have set stops, but most of them do. And so you'll see bus stop signs in the ground. So that's kind of a local fixed route. Design of the fixed routes really do kind of matter as well. And as I was talking about kind of what dictates what makes high quality transit service, these are some guidelines. Transit can be designed to meet different goals, but in general, the service that's more direct and easier to understand. People understand when they want to go from one place to another, they like to go more directly. Generally, it's better to operate service in both directions along a street, and so that people can make can return from where they start, so they can make a return trip. Services that have a consistent schedule so we can remember them. 11, 10:30, 11, 10, 11:30. You can see here on the TARTA schedule, very consistent schedules, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's much easier to understand than a route that comes very irregularly. And then finally, I think having stops that are consistently spread throughout the route, it's easier for people to understand that they know if they come out to a route, they know that there's either a stop close to them or they know to travel along that route and it's relatively close. And so keeping stop spacing relatively consistent is also, again, all of these things kind of matter in terms of making transit more successful. So those are kind of more local fixed route services. Regional fixed routes can be a little bit different. I'm calling out a sort of an extreme example here from the Denver region that operates really long regional routes. And they go from, kind of mountain or rural areas and all the way into downtown Denver. They make very few stops. And kind of the difference with these kinds of services is that they're more competitive with driving. So you may get somebody who's going to live along this route and decide to take it because it's just as fast as driving and maybe more convenient and comfortable. and they may not have to deal with things like parking when they get to their destination. So regional fixed routes are a little bit different than the locals. On the on-demand side, I want to talk a little bit about microtransit characteristics. So microtransit generally refers, it's kind of an on-demand service, so people can get it when they want to. Generally, it's same-day service, and the kind of the key difference between microtransit and on-demand, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, is it's really about technology and using technology to maximize the efficiency of that trip. And so the graphic on the upper right-hand corner really, I think, describes microtransit fairly well, where people request a ride, very similar to an Uber or Lyft, which probably all familiar with. So you request a ride, it has dynamic routing. And the difference with microtransit is that it uses the technology to group trips together, and it's efficiently doing that, so you can maximize the use of that vehicle. So you request a trip, you may have a shared ride, and it drops you off where you want to go. These are typically based on zones, so you can't just drive, you can't take this trip from, northern Wood County all the way to Columbus, but it's within a certain distance. As I mentioned, it's on demand. So that means it doesn't necessarily require a reservation. So you can pick up your phone, you can request the ride, and that vehicle then will tell you when you will be able to get picked up. But generally, there's a time period from which they design the system so that you get picked up within a certain period of time, and usually 15 to 30 minutes, something like that. Again, it could be shared ride to maximize flexibility. They tend to use smaller vehicles so that they can get in and out of parking lots and other things. Big buses are harder to turn around. Smaller buses are easy to do that. The other piece about microtransit is it's easy to kind of scale, it's easier, I should say, to scale up and scale down service. You don't publish a schedule. You just publish a service that's out there and available. And so if it's really successful, you can add more vehicles. If it's less successful, you can take vehicles away. So there's some flexibility there in terms of how microtransit can work. There is a bit of a difference between on-demand service and microtransit. On-demand has been provided in Wood County for a long time. Perrysburg Transit provides service. BG Transit provides service in Bowling Green. But those tend to be operated more by cities or municipalities. They are often call ahead to book those trips. Oftentimes you need to call even a day before. In some cases, you can call within an hour if there's availability. So there's a little bit of a difference between on-demand service. As I mentioned, microtransit oftentimes is operated by a transit agency or an organization, a larger municipal organization. They tend to be app-based. They can call ahead. Not everybody likes having an app, so there is an option there, but most trips are booked with the app. You can book, in some cases, microtransit within the day before, but they're really mostly within a 30-minute or 15-minute, in some cases, window. So yeah, there's a little bit of a difference. We wanted to call that out because you may have heard on demand, you may have heard microtransit. There is a slight distinction. And again, I think that the big difference is the microtransit tends to be more technology based. The final on-demand kind of service is paratransit. So paratransit, you may have heard, TARTA Move is the paratransit provider for TARTA. You have to be certified to use paratransit. Again, it's for, I'm kind of going to read this because it comes from the brochure for TARTA Move, but it's a legally required service for people with disabilities in combination with their functional abilities who cannot use fixed route service. So it is really there to complement the fixed route service. They have to operate the same hours as fixed route. They usually operate within a 3/4 mile buffer of fixed route. So that's the map that you can see here. You do have to pre-book those services, and they are shared ride. So there is a little bit of a difference between paratransit. Some people will use paratransit for employment, and so we wanted to call that out. But typically, paratransit is used for, for all kinds of trips, medical trips, shopping, recreation, etc. So those are kind of the four major kinds of bus transit services you might see, and we wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into those. We did want to call out a few local examples. So in Bowling Green, there are a couple different kinds of services here. Fixed route service provided by BGESU shuttle, as you can see that in the upper right-hand corner. There's also BG Transit, which is an on-demand service within Bowling Green. So two different kinds of services within Bowling Green, and Bowling Green is really kind of that good mixed neighborhood. It's got a mix of residential, commercial, institutional. Of course, the university is very big. But most of the trips within Bowling Green are relatively short distances between the residential areas, the downtown, and of course, the campus. There's the one difference I would say in Bowling Green that you might not see in other places like Northern Wood County is that there's parking constraints on the campus. And even in downtown, it's not as easy to just drive everywhere you need to go. And so transit can be a little bit more successful in places like Bowling Green for that reason. It also has that complementary pedestrian and bike network in the city. Another local example is Perrysburg. So Perrysburg is served by Perrysburg Transit. It's an on-demand door-to-door service throughout the city. Again, it's primarily for low-density residential and commercial clusters in the city. Offers circulation, kind of first last mile in some cases. And you can see the map in the bottom corner here. A lot of those are making connections to the Tartar Route 10, but many of the trips within Bowling Green and in Perrysburg on Perrysburg Transit are relatively short. So, so this is another kind of on-demand service and another good example. You probably have seen this, and we've had the needs assessment report, but we felt like it was important to sort of, again, as we're talking about these different kinds of services, bring it back to kind of local examples. In Rossford has actually three different kinds of service. It has the fixed route, which I would say is kind of more of a local and regional fixed route. It has Tarta Flex. So Tarta Flex is the microtransit service that operates within Rossford in Oregon. And it has Tarta Move. So that 3/4 mile buffer around the fixed route service offers that paratransit service. Rossford is kind of a mixed community. It has residential areas, has a lot of commercial, has a lot of institutional services, but it also has a lot of warehousing, manufacturing along the 75-795 corridor. At the end of this corridor, you can see this is a boarding map. So the larger the circle on the Route 10 ridership map, has at the very bottom is Amazon. So one of the bigger destinations on this route. And a really important reason why this route is in place. It is important to note, we'll talk about this as we get into this, but Route 10 is planned to be improved in January 2026. And we think will improve workforce access. It's actually going to come into East Toledo to get into downtown. So there's some big changes coming for Route 10, and frequency is going to be improved on that route too. We wanted to talk about a couple of other examples, not in the area, that are really more that we don't see here, but they are more workforce focused. So this is an example in the Columbus region. So COTA Great Workforce Shuttle. The focus of these, and you can see the bus down here, is really about connecting between local fixed routes and some industrial areas. It's operated by the city. They coordinate with COTA. And the shuttle is free to ride, and it operates a pretty wide range of time. So from 5:45 a.m. all the way up to 9:30 p.m. Aligned with work shifts, and operates 7 days a week. So this is a pretty robust shuttle that operates. And again, it's largely about connecting to those fixed routes. And I was looking at this, and they say, don't worry. You get on the fixed route, we're going to be there when the bus gets there. So this bus is designed to meet those trips. That's a really important part. And then it will take them to wherever they're going within this area. Another example of this is a little bit more of a fixed route connection. This is outside of Indianapolis, that connects to one of their fixed routes here at the Bridgeport Road station, but then it basically is a first mile, last mile kind of connection to a major industrial area. There's a lot of similar kinds of employers here. There's Amazon, there's a Walmart, actually a couple of Amazons here. So very similar to Northern Wood County. Again, connecting to that Route 8 does it on a timed connection. So the bus is always there when the Route 8 is there. It's actually another transportation authority that is set up. They run a couple of these workforce shuttles in outside of Indianapolis. The service is free to ride. And one thing that's, I think, really interesting is that their very first trip of the day, they actually start in downtown Indianapolis. So because this Route 8 isn't running as early, they know that many of these employers have early shift times, like at 6 a.m. And so they make a connection in downtown Indianapolis. I think it's at 5 a.m. or around that time, so that they can get out to this area. So they make a more direct, kind of have one trip that's a little bit different than the rest of the day, where they connect to this fixed route. So those were a couple of examples of different kinds of transit services, both in Wood County, but also outside, that are really workforce focused, that we thought were important to kind of share it with you all. The other thing is that we wanted to talk a little bit just about how is transit operated, who pays for it. Most public transit providers are usually run by public agencies. They're usually very subsidized. Rarely are they run by for-profit entities. Sometimes they're run by nonprofits. They're often funded through a combination of federal and state, local funding. Fares make up a relatively small portion of transit operating revenue. So they're subsidized. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner that TARTA actually has a pretty high percentage of their revenue that's directly generated. Now, a lot of that comes from the sales tax levy. Some of that is also from fares, but the large majority of this, about 90% of their total funding, comes from either sales tax or from fares, and most of it is sales tax. They get a little bit from the federal government, a little bit, even much less from state government. This is on average. Revenues change a lot. They fluctuate throughout the years, but we thought it was important to call that out. So that's how TARTA is funded. BG Transit's a little bit different. They have a kind of a combination, more classic, I would say, combination of sources. About half of their funding comes from federal government, about a quarter comes from the state, 11% is directly generated. Those are probably from fares or from the BGSU. There are other, and then about 13% comes from the local government. So they get a combination of funding that that looks a little bit different than TARTA. So there are some good examples in Wood County that are managed by TARTA, the City of Bowling Green, Perrysburg, and the BGSU. So they're all kind of different operators. Perrysburg uses their local property tax levy to provide their service. The BGSU service is primarily funded through their student fees. So funding is a complicated and interesting issue, I will say, for transit. It's all over the place. It could change year to year, but we wanted to give you just a little background on how these transit services are funded. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Tom, who's going to talk a little bit more about those other strategies that help to support the transit services that are out there. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so we've also been working in parallel to the primary focus of the study to develop a transportation demand management toolkit that would be a set of resources to help support transit by providing a suite of alternatives, not just to driving alone, but to transit, so that your only alternative isn't transit. There's always other alternatives. So it's a combination of expanding those alternatives and making people aware of those alternatives, including transit, but beyond that as well. So this is what we refer to as transportation demand management, or TDM, is a suite of strategies that improve non-drive alone access, particularly in this case to jobs, services, and social connection. It helps people access all available transportation options It supports civic goals to reduce congestion and increase access and mobility, and helps us get more out of our existing transportation infrastructure. So often the focus of TDM is not creating new infrastructure, but it's about using what we have more efficiently, by increasing the occupancy of vehicles and or just letting more people know what their options are. Next slide. So often when Nelson Nygaard is working on a TDM study, and this is a lot of what I do in a typical week, we are looking to objectives like mode shift, reducing congestion, reducing air pollution, emissions, carbon buildup, et cetera. In this case, though, we are focused on workplace access. It's a different objective, but the means are the same. And the challenge has really been set up by um, you know, growth patterns that have created increasing challenges for regional commuters that have pushed the importance of vehicle ownership. And so for a lot of folks in Wood County working in Wood County jobs, this is an important part of their access to jobs in the county or from where they live in Wood County. But for many, this is not an option. For many different reasons, they are not able to drive. But even for those who are available, and Paul touched on this earlier, the cost of maintaining a reliable car are quite high. Average new car, one estimate is $12,000 per year. Highly reliable used car being $10,000 per year. So that's a significant cost for many folks. So making drive alone alternatives more viable for more Wood County commuters would mean that that those car ownership barriers can be reduced, and folks can get and maintain better jobs in Wood County. Next slide. And again, the idea of TDM as a companion to transit is to not put all of this pressure on transit to be the only alternative to driving alone. So our work really began by looking at existing Wood County resources that we would put in this category of transportation demand management. And the first is something that I've been aware of. This has been around a statewide program for about 10 years. In Wood County, this is managed by TMACOG. It's a GoHio platform. This is a platform that different council of governments across the state uh, do different things with, but it's a pretty expansive and dynamic platform that can support trip planning services, rewards programs. So if I bike to work or I take transit to work, I can compete with others who use that mode for commuting to be the one who travels the most miles by bus, things like that. It provides a wealth of information for all available travel options, where you live and where you commute, or where you might be going for a non-commute trip. And it is eligible for all those in the TMACOG region, including Wood County. Next slide. One of the core components of the GoHio platform is a free ride matching service. And this is something that we have seen a really important technology. Paul talked about the transformation that apps have brought to on-demand transit service, and that being really key to microtransit becoming an option in more areas of the country. Similarly, technology has made it easier for folks to find rideshare partners, whether that's a van pool or a carpool. Finding people with compatible routes to work, schedules, and even in the case of the GoHio platform, if my employer is a registered employer with the GoHio platform, I can look for shared ride partners who also work for my same employer. I can filter for that employer. So if I work at First Solar, I can look for folks that work for the same employer, and we have found over the years that that increases the comfort level with finding a reliable partner that you can trust if you want to explore carpool or vanpool as your primary commute option. Next slide. Another great resource in Wood County is the Mobility Managers Program. These are folks who increase access to mobility in defined service areas by increasing understanding and awareness of transportation options. and helping communities integrate transportation into planning and programs on local, regional, and state levels. The Wood County Getting Around 2024 Transit Guide is one example of some of the informational resources that this organization makes available. Next slide. And so from these resources that were there before our study began, we're looking to develop a toolkit that will expand upon those resources to see if we can develop programs that would offer transit cost savings. As Paul has been talking about, the primary focus of the study is, are there opportunities to improve or expand transit service within Wood County that would become part of the toolkit? Transit stop improvements. So once you have fixed route service and you have those stops and signs that are out there, can you make the stop experience more weather protected, more comfortable, more dignified, I think, as Paul mentioned, as part of encouraging more people to take transit, but also just safer. If the bus stop is across a busy highway, can you improve that pedestrian cross? If across a highway from a key employer, can you improve that crossing so that connection to the transit is safer? Rideshare support, so going beyond what is out there today, just information, but directly supporting the development and maintenance of carpools and van pools. Bike access improvements. This is increasingly important and often overlooked in areas like Ohio, where we do have deep winters. Folks will ride bikes surprising lengths if that is what it takes to get and maintain a job. And maybe that's option D, but making that a safer, better, and more dignified experience, even if it's option D or option C. And for your commuting, that can be a key part of this, again, suite of resources to keep people employed in Wood County. Pedestrian access often to transit, but just in general, making sure that there's always a walking connection, even if you're driving, but particularly if you're relying on transit or non-driving modes, those walking sub trips tend to be of longer length. So making sure that those walking trips are safer for folks. And then getting into the support programs. Often in many regions, there are programs that we refer to as guaranteed ride home or emergency ride home. And this is really a program for folks that do commute by alternative modes, non-driving, drive alone modes, so that on the occasion when life circumstances prevent you from using your typical mode, whether that's transit or carpooling, you can take a cab home and get reimbursed for that cost. And the typical program would reimburse that maybe up to 4 times per year. And then finally, information and promotion. I mentioned the GoHio platform. That's a great resource. The Mobility Managers Program is another great resource. So looking to build upon those strengths and make sure that wherever I work in Wood County, folks are talking to my employer and getting me information, as much information as possible, as easily as possible, so I know what all of my travel options are. So again, as Paul mentioned, even if I drive alone, but my car is in the shop this week, I don't lose my job because I know where to go and I have options for getting to work until my car is back in service. And I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
All right, any questions from folks? I think we had one clarifying point I think I wanted to call out, that many of the trips are the highest number of trip purpose on paratransit is employment. And that's really good to know. In fact, that's true on all of the transit services operated by TARTA. So employment is a major part of what transit is there for. So thank you, Catherine, for making that point clear. But
Paul, I want
other-
to add to that point that Catherine made, that it's amazing how many trips are generating revenue in some way. So when folks are using transit to get to work, that is generating revenue for the community. But even trips to the doctor or to the store are also revenue generating. So it's something that folks don't always think about when they think about transit.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, any questions? Anything that you'd like me to go back to or Tom to go back to? Happy to happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Anything that you feel like we left out that maybe you wanted some clarifying questions on? Everything perfectly clear? I guess, while everybody's thinking about this, I think one thing that we wanted to do with these lunch and learns was, I know you've heard a lot of this information before, but we felt like it was important to sort of, as we move into the next phase of the study, Callie mentioned this earlier on, but we wanted to kind of frame up some of the things that are rising to the top in terms of some of the strategies. And as we start to formulate those, we thought it was important to kind of dig into those a little bit. So when you do come back to the steering committee and to the larger regional forum that we had early in May, and I think it was invited to this lunch and learn, we wanted to at least make sure that you had maybe a bit more of an understanding of what these different services are and how they could work together. So that was another major reason for these lunch and learns. All right. Well, we could also turn a few more minutes back to your day if there are no questions. Again, this will be recorded. You're always welcome to send questions via email. You can send them to Callie, and Callie can forward them on to us. So we don't want to keep everybody on a call if we don't have any questions. I don't want to. We've got a few more minutes, so happy to hang out too if you want to.
Yes, and maybe Paul and I will stay on, but invite folks to leave if they need to. I wanted to reiterate that we have our next Lunch and Learn next Tuesday already. So these two are really close to each other, and we expect that we might add a few Lunch and Learns after our December workshop. We haven't set those dates yet, but we thought we wanted that flexibility to respond to the types of direction that the study takes, and that your feedback also brings us in December. So I hope everybody on the call today has accepted their reservation or their calendar invite for December 3rd from 10 to noon. That is going to be an online workshop, and there are going to be ways that you will be able to give feedback. We're planning to fully exploit our technology there to help hear from everybody, and also to take it to this next level that Paul's talking about, looking at what workforce solutions in Wood County really would look like, how we might map those out, and begin the talk about cost and different kinds of funding. So all of that is ahead of us. And then we are planning again to meet the end of March for this group for a final report at Penta Career Center. That is an in-person meeting, also 10 to noon on March 29th. I should have looked up that date. I'm pretty sure that's right. It might be 25th. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a moment. Maybe someone can clarify that for me. Anyway, we are looking forward to that and having that flesh out both short-term goals for Wood County Transit as well as mid and long-term goals and what that might look like. So we appreciate your feedback in helping us get to that point. And also just feel grateful for all those who are supporting this effort and trying to make a better workforce mobility situation in Wood County. So thank you all. And like I said, feel free to stay on if you want to talk to us personally. Otherwise, you can feel free to finish your lunch. Thank you.
And just
Thanks,
to
everyone.
clarify,
And
also
Chris,
March
thank
25th.
you. It is March 25th.
Yeah. You were
I
close.
knew
Yeah.
I was close.
You were very close.
It's been a while since I've had to say that date. So there we are. So very fun.
All right. Well,
Anyone
thank you,
have
everybody. Really
any?
appreciate your time.
Yep. And Sean, we'll talk to you in a couple hours, actually. So we'll see you at 3, if not sooner. Well, thank you, Paul. I'm going to go ahead
Oh,
and stop
yeah.
the recording.
Okay.
Let's see if I can do that.
Thank you, Tom, for that.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yes. Yeah, great job, everybody.